Hello there, my name is Jack Edwards and welcome to my YouTube channel. For this week's video I wanted to make a comprehensive guide to student housing because it is a minefield. You know, you're completely thrown in at the deep end in a brand new city surrounded by brand new people and you suddenly have to decide which of those brand new people you want to live with for a year and where in that brand new city you want to live. So I wanted to start by saying that it is completely normal to feel stressed or anxious or worried or confused about the whole process, but hopefully this video can kind of alleviate some of that stress and answer some of the questions that you might have and kind of show you how I found my student house. So just quickly, in case any of you are new here or don't know, I am a second year Durham University student. So last year I was living in halls of residence. This year I live in a student house which I rent from a landlord with 3 of my best mates. Obviously every city is different, but in Durham the properties tend to go very, very quickly. So everyone signs very early on in the year, which is so stressful, I can't even tell you. So this time last year we signed for this house that I'm currently living in, and we decided last week to just re-sign for it for next year as well with exactly the same people because we love the landlord, we love the house. So I think we've struck a bit of gold here, and I wanted to tell you kind of how we found this house, how I found the perfect housemates, and how you can too. So firstly, let's talk about housemates. First and foremost, the general rule of thumb is do not live with someone you are romantically involved with. Do not shit where you eat. Now, I don't mean to be cynical or like the Scrooge of relationships, but not all relationships last, and not all relationships end in an amicable way. I'm not speaking from personal experience, but I have heard so many horror stories about people who signed in first year to live with someone who they thought they were madly and deeply in love with, who they've now split up from and are stuck living with, and potentially sharing a double bed with, in their house, and that just sounds like hell. So what I'm saying is live with your friends, prioritize your friends, and do not become that horror story that everyone else shudders at. So moving on from that, some things that you need to consider when looking for housemates. You need to consider how many people you want to live with. So do you want to live in a big house which will be noisy and busy and there'll always be someone around, or do you want to live in a slightly smaller house where, you know, you still live with your friends but you have a bit more space, a bit more peace and quiet, and you're not always on each other's toes? If you have a big friendship group, is there a way you can divide that up into smaller houses? This isn't always a bad thing. You can end up with more social spaces. You can take it in turns to host like pre-drinks or dinners and stuff like that. Just because you don't live with them in second year doesn't mean you won't see them. You'll see them loads and you can always invite them round or go to theirs. And it's sometimes nice to have to make a bit more effort to see each other. Also, do you want to live with all boys or all girls or in a mixed house, and what kind of ratio of boys to girls do you want? Personally, and this is just my preference, I live in a house with 2 guys, 2 girls, and it works really well. The dynamic is really nice and we get on like a house on fire. And luckily we haven't set the house on fire yet. Make sure you are living with people who are reliable, fun, friendly, people you can trust, and people you know you won't clash with. But by the same token, it's not just about your relationships with people, it's about your housemates' relationships with each other. So, you know, if there are 2 who you think will clash, probably best not to live with them because it's going to make a very hostile environment. You're going to end up having to pick sides or stuff like that. You don't need any of that. Living together bit is meant to be the fun bit. So pick people you know you are going to get on with and people who are going to get on with each other. I actually lived with all of my current housemates in my halls of residence, so I knew that I liked them enough to live with them again. I knew that we all got on, I knew that we didn't clash, and we worked well as a group. However, if you're planning to live with people you've never lived with before, then I think it's definitely worth meeting up for coffee, hanging out as a group, talking about what your priorities are when looking for houses, what time you go to bed, what time you get up, what kind of things you want to use the house for. For example, if you are not into parties, you want to go to bed at 9 PM every single night, an early night and a quiet house, living with people who want to have house parties every other night, probably not the best idea for you, you know? So, now you have your housemates, you need to find a house. Good places to find these, there's a website called StuRents, which tends to have a lot of student properties. Letting agents around the city that you're planning to live in will have like pictures and stuff. It's a good idea to just go into their buildings and they'll have these catalogues, and you can say like, we're looking for a house of 4 or 5 or 6, and they will flick to the right pages and highlight which ones you should go and look at. Also, word of mouth. If you know people in the years above who can recommend houses to you, that's great. Have a walk around the student house areas. There tend to be big areas in these cities where lots of students live, to have a walk around those areas and just get some ideas of which houses are on the market and that kind of thing, and then you can look them up afterwards. Organising viewings for houses. Now I would say it's best to go with a letting agent first, let them show you around the property with kind of their expert opinion, but also it's worth just knocking on people's doors and asking for a tour of the house. Almost every student will happily take you for a tour of their house just quickly. They'll also give you a really honest opinion of the house, how they found it, what the landlord's like, that kind of thing. So that's really, really valuable. And I definitely say, if you're getting close to signing a house, go around with the letting agent, but also go around with the student. So go around in your own time to the house, politely ask if you can look around. If they say no, respect that, it is their home. But the thing is, a student isn't trying to sell the house to you. They don't care if you rent it or not, because they don't profit, they don't lose anything if you don't sign that house. A letting agent does really want you to sign that house, so it's good to get both opinions, okay? Get a rounded view, and the student will be far more honest than the letting agent will be. One really important thing to look at is the size of the kitchen. Consider how many people you are planning to live with and how big the kitchen is. There will be times where everyone is trying to cook dinner all at once, or everyone is in the kitchen all at once. Is there going to be enough room for you all there? Is there enough storage space for food? So think about the fridge, the freezer, storage cupboards, cupboards for utensils, all of that kind of thing, because one little tiny freezer for 8 people is not going to cut it. That's going to be such a squeeze. Pay attention to the kitchen and work out if it's big enough for the amount of people that you are going to be living with. Next, look at the size of the living areas and social spaces. So is there a dining table? Are there sofas? How many sofas? How many people can sit on sofas all at once? Because actually, I remember going around, originally we were looking at houses of 8, and we went to these houses and they had these really tiny living rooms which could probably seat 5 people max. We then went around some 4-bed houses and they had far bigger living areas for just 4 people. And so that's what led us to split our group into 2, and so we ended up living in a house of 4 which has much bigger social spaces than any of the big houses that we looked at. But yes, definitely check that the space you are looking at will fit the number of people you are planning to live with, because not every student house will. Next thing to look out for is the bedroom. So make sure you are happy with every single bedroom, because you could end up in any of them. A lot of the time people draw straws, or pull out of a hat who's sleeping in what room, or do random generators, that kind of thing. So you could end up in any of those bedrooms. Right. Lovely area I live in. So when you're looking around, try to imagine yourself and your possessions in each of those bedrooms. Are all of them going to be big enough? Because you could end up in the smallest room, or you could end up in the biggest room. So make sure you'd be happy to sleep in any of them. Some more things to consider. Number 1, are the beds double beds or single beds? You need to think about what each of your housemates want. So for example, I have a single bed at home, and I had a single bed last year at uni, so I've never known anything different. I was more than happy to have a single bed this year, and it meant that our rent was slightly cheaper because all of the rooms have single beds rather than doubles, and so I was more than happy to just stick with a single bed. Second thing to consider is the noisiness. So how busy is the outside of your house? Do you live on a main road? Are there buses that go past? Do people go past on their way home from nights out and shout and that kind of thing? That's one of those things you can definitely ask the current tenants, and they will be completely honest with you, and that is one thing to consider. Next is the distance to all of the places you need to go. So how far is it from your lectures? How far is it from the town centre? How far is it from the sports centres or gyms? How far is it from the library? My housemates and I made a list of all the places that we tended to go on a weekly basis, and then plugged them all into Google Maps to see how far from the house each of those places were. Next thing to consider is the storage space in the room. So is there, a big wardrobe? Are there many chests of drawers? How much under bed storage is there, and that kind of thing? Are there shelves on the walls? Enough places to put your possessions. Then consider the bathrooms versus the number of people. In my personal experience, my housemates and I never really clash in terms of who needs to use the shower and stuff, but we have 2 showers between 4 people, which works out really, really well. So yeah, it is really worth noting how many bathrooms there are proportionate to the number of people who will need to use them. And the last one is a kind of weird one which you may not have considered, but are there places to dry your clothes? Not all student houses will have a tumble dryer, or in our case, won't have a working tumble dryer. So it is worth considering whether there are places where you can hang your clothes up when they're wet, when they've just come out of the washer. We have a balcony and an outdoor area which is really useful, and also spaces kind of in the hallway on the landing. So take that into consideration as well. Next thing I wanted to move on to is what is included in your house. So which bills are included. I wanted to talk a little bit about bills actually, because sometimes it is cheaper to have bills not included. One of the best pieces of advice I got last year is that landlords wouldn't do bills included unless it benefited them in some way, because landlords only want to make a profit. That's the whole point. So consider, is it worth a little bit of an extra cost and less of the hassle to just pay and have bills included, or would you prefer to do them yourself? The house I'm in works out really well because some of our bills are included, so water, broadband, TV license, etc. is included, but then we pay it for our own gas and electricity. And on the whole, that actually works out cheaper than paying for a house which had bills included. It seems like a really good deal, but sometimes it isn't, so just be considerate of that. Also, what other things does the house come with? So is there a Hoover? Is there a microwave, a kettle? A washing machine, that kind of thing. Does it have a TV? One of the biggest selling points of our house is that it had a beer fridge, and I walked into the house, saw the beer fridge, and I was like, I will sign the contract today. Also, although it shouldn't be a determining factor as to whether you sign the house, are there kitchen utensils included? So plates, bowls, spoons, knives, forks, glassware, that kind of thing. Just so you know whether you need to buy some before you come in or whether the landlord kind of provides some for you. And finally, when you go to visit the house with the current tenants, what should you ask them? Firstly, what is the landlord like? Do they respond quickly? Have there been problems in the house, and how have they dealt with them? How much approximately do their bills cost? Which energy provider are they with? And would they recommend that exact provider? And finally, what has their experience been like in the house? You know, a landlord or a letting agent isn't going to know or isn't going to tell you whether the walls are really thin, whether there isn't enough storage space, whether the street is really noisy at 1 AM on a Monday night every single week, whether the place you have to take your bins out is really far away, or whether the doorbell is really, really quiet. You know, it's that kind of thing that the students can give you a real insight into, and so it's really, really worth asking their opinion. So that's all from me. I hope this video was helpful. I hope it kind of gave you a bit of an insight into student housing and how to find the perfect house. As I said, I love my house, so these tips have worked for me, and I hope they work for you. So thank you very much for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did find it helpful. I've been Jack Edwards, and I will see you next time. Bye bye!